Always have to. Right. All right. So this slide just explains. I've dropped the link right in the group chat. So please you can use it. We're going to use a great number of it when we get to module 9, module 10 particularly. Okay, so we just look at how to create. This is just a step on how to create. You can do a screen grab and then go through it later. So Metapreter is actually a tool. It's an exploitation tool that is part of the Metasploit framework. So Metasploit is actually like a framework for penetration testing. It exploits information. So two words put together is meta. Meta will be information that is not visible. It's part of information as part of every file that is not visible. You can't see them, but they are part of it. They help describe the properties of the device of the file. Could be, let's say, if it's a picture, you could have, maybe the camera it was taken with the longitude and latitude, depending on if it is actually available, the time, right, the frame, the type of lens that was used, the type of device. Could also tell you the format and the size. All of this is I explained, but if you look at the picture itself, those information are not there. So meta information, meta is what is not visible to the eye, but is there. So it exploits meta information. That's what this particular framework does, or the particular tool does. It goes as far as extracting details about a particular file or a particular traffic that is not visible to the eye. And then you're able to now analyze those details and tell whether this particular file or this path or this traffic is redirected or is compromised, it is malicious. It does this against the backdrop of what is expected to be standard, which is the signature that you should have, right? So yeah, in this particular set, you're using a set now. That's a social engineering toolkit to frame to create a payload that is going to be used as an attack. Okay, so how about now? Rejoice, can you hear now? I was logged out earlier. Can you hear now? Sorry about that. I was logged out earlier. Network was. I just saw your message saying that you can't hear. Okay, great. Okay, Ikoyi, you can hear. I don't know if Rejoice can hear. She was saying that she could not hear. I don't know if she's still in the meeting. Apologies for today's fluctuation. All right. So I've dropped the link. So please do a screen grab and follow. This is just to help you see what you can do. So there are quite a number of steps of what to do. If you want to do a Windows reverse TCP shell, you want to use email template, all of these are steps, right? Breakdown of what to do. We're going to attempt doing it when we get to module 10. Yeah. So again, do a screen grab and then use this. We're going to look at email for port 25. Look at HTTPS for port 443. So see how we can, extract information about them, or try to send some things into the place that are bigger than, or they're not supposed to be there. Okay. So these are other tools, cross-site scripting, or what we call XSS, right? Let me attempt to explain what that is, right? It's simply how do I put it now? Okay, so it's a vulnerability that exists in a web page on a website. Now, it is expected that all websites are supposed to have some structure of security which should not allow somebody, to redirect or jump into it. So it's just imagine having a house and have somebody walk into the house, right? So there's what is called the validation, right? Input validation. Typically, the input validation is largely what is considered a valid input. Let me break it down into. I'm a teacher, so I like to use terms that are actually what one can relate with, then attempt to marry it to technical things. So typically, each website, right, is built of some scripts and codes or sometimes software. Now, to ensure that the data that is submitted by users is accurate or that it is safe, right? What usually occurs is that there is a field that is checked as what is considered valid. Oh, my internet today, Lord have mercy. So typically, once a builder of a website, right, is building a website, there are two things the person needs to check. There is usually the client side, right? And then there's the server side, right? So how are we sure that the characters that they are imputing to access this website are safe, right? And apart from it being safe, do they conform to what we consider the predefined conditions or criteria? So that way, if anybody is imputing anything, remember I mentioned earlier that the network that we have today is built such that it's just like shop and people going to buy from shop. And then there are certain currencies that are accepted, right? How that in Nigeria, nobody can bring a sefer and go to a shop and purchase. Some time ago, I think it was some months ago, um, somebody raised dust about how that there was a shop in Abuja and that they pay money, that a lady entered into the place and they kicked her out, only for her to go ahead and just blow the whistle to say that there's a shop in Nigeria where they use yen, that the products in the shop are labeled instead of naira, right? They use yen. Somebody was arguing, like, but there are shops where they do in dollar. However, she was upset because they kicked her out, right? So the validation, the input that is considered valid in that shop is yen. The exchange that allows anybody to purchase or buy is yen. Whereas in our country, Nigeria, it's not allowed. The sovereignty of the sovereign currency or the legal tender within this particular domain is the naira. So if somebody is trading with any other currency apart from that, it should be looked at. Well, they eventually close down the shop, blah, 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 and all. So typically for websites, if somebody is a client and attempts to go to a website, whether from the client side or the server side, there is what is considered valid for the purpose of ensuring that the exchange of information does not compromise the parties involved. So that's what the input validation is. Now, once a website is built with scripts or with softwares that do not meet what is expected to be the preset condition, then it is very possible that the input validation is weak. And once that happens, anybody can go ahead to insert or impute. This is what leads to what we call um, SQL injection, right? Where typically somebody takes advantage of the language that's supposed to be exchanged between client and webs to add a value there that can sit there. So that particular value, right, is not considered valid, it's not considered invalid, but then it's just allowed to be there. That's typically how attackers happen. So what happens to those kind of sites, the sites that actually have input validation issues, cross site scripting, or what we call or cross-site request forgery, right? Is typically a way that attackers can go ahead to compromise, particularly when the input validation is not very set. And we have a lot of these sites happening, you know. It doesn't mean, if you build a website, it can actually be there. But there are some people who will not host it because it doesn't meet a condition. That's like the example I was giving earlier about having NAFDAC and standard organization. That's why it's not good to buy free things or to get free things. Because if it doesn't have the needed standard, or what is considered the valid, then of course you are compromised. So it introduces a vulnerability, a weakness in the structure of the website. So it allows for people to cross script, right? So typically cross to explain better explain now, the cross-site scripting just allows an attacker to inject any malicious script. Why? The input validation field is not querying, it's not stressing. Somebody can go ahead and take a script from one site and cross over to your site and inject it. So I shouldn't be allowing people just inject script into your site. And the only way that can happen is that if the input validation is of any web application or a website. Remember, I'm talking about the client side and the server side. Very important. So this is typically one of those tools that people use. So their vulnerabilities are often used to redirect users to malicious websites to steal cookies, right? And other sensitive information. Now, these session tokens are very important. This is saying, like I said, if you don't have a understanding of network, it might be a little bit shady, but it's okay. We're growing with it. Typically, conversations between client and server must have, the initiation and then an acknowledgement of that initiation. So typically, somebody can hijack that session which is like a receipt of an already concluded conversation, and present it again on another side, assuming that this conversation, these are my receipts. I was here before. Just imagine somebody using tax clearance, right, of last year for this year by just scraping some values, some figures from it. You get so you'd have to be very good to look at it to tell, okay, but last year these values were not there, or these values were there. This year there's a value that was added. No, sir, this value, this particular receipt is not proper. So some sites take. That's why we do. That's what cross site scripting results to, right? Because the input validation is not thoroughly checked by reason of not meeting the criteria. It throws open that website to malicious attacks. The malicious attacks now are where people can actually go ahead and drop a script that redirects you from a site to another site, and that way the reason why you're going to that site is, of course, they are going to have a portal or a particular opening that leads to allows you to put some values. You can just eventually go ahead and reset and all. Okay, browser exploitation framework is a tool that can be used to manipulate users by leveraging cross-site scripting as well. So BEFF, right? Then you can download it from here as well. Let me try to see if I can give you guys that link as well, just to look at it. Oh, don't worry, please just be keeping them. We'll use them. Let's get down from GitHub. I prefer GitHub. Let's get from GitHub, right? I'll drop it also now in the group chat. Just links for you to look at. Yes. Yeah, so let me drop this. This is GitHub, right? So the other people who are not in class might be seeing these links and don't understand what's happening. Then go click and collect something. So these are tools, social engineering tools. That's what we're looking at. So this is what it looks like, right? So when you launch it, the tool starts a web service on port 3000 by default. From there, the attacker can log into a web console and manipulate users who are victims of this. So once any site, right, has input validation issues, of course, it will be flagged here, so I can just go ahead and perhaps just get a list of sites and check which ones are available. There was a time when a particular state had a website. Somebody brought it to my attention. We saw it. It was an organization that was supposed to be dealing with funds. We realized that we had to draw their attention quickly. And of course, they did something about it, right? So this is what it will look like. It will launch like a website and then launch up for 3,000. So this is the same when you're stealing a browser cookie using this, right? So this is what I'm proposing, right? I'm proposing that we're going to have, because we're supposed to have like 10 contacts for the modules. Ideally, we should do the modules, but hopefully, I want to introduce one of those is where we'll sit down and implement some of these things. Like not like implement, run them so you see how they run. Like from this diagram here now, you can see this is the control panel for the browser exploitation framework, right? So you see it tells you whether the capability of the browsers good. Here is yes. Browser capabilities for WMP, no, right? And all of this is so you can list where is weak. It just displays the credentials of the website. So you now know what website is actually porous and can be attacked. So all these guys who do websites for you, right? They need a great number of people who do websites, just do websites with, what's expected of it, and they can compromise here and there. But a cybersecurity person or an ethical hacker's perspective should be with respect to how safe these websites are. So that is why we always advise people that if you are going to do any form of login where you are expected to put in credentials that are considered sensitive or confidential, ensure that there is an S. It's not just HTTP. It should be HTTPS because that takes care of most of this thing we're talking about here. Right? This sending a fake notification to the victim and all of those. So typically you see something like this, right? This is a fake notification in the browser. It will tell you that your browser is expired. Download the latest version here. You go click and go collect some things, right? So there are some call spoofing applications, right? And these are tools that are used for social engineering. For iOS, we have Spoof app, right? And then there's Spoof card for Android and iOS. We have Asterisk. Remember Asterisk? For those of you who have done VoIP, voice over IP. It's a legitimate voice over IP management tool that can be used to impersonate caller ID. Typically, it's like saying, I will just punch in the number that should be saved, you know. So that's why once a friend of yours is calling you and the number is displaying, other than the way you saved the name on your phone, you know, there's a challenge from there. So these are tools, just going through them because we have just 5 more minutes to be done. So this is the lab we're going to be doing, right? And this lab is what I'm hoping that we are going to run one of these days. Again, this is my word to you. I'm owing you this lab. Typically launching set, then cloning a website, and then capturing and viewing user credentials on website. That's what we're going to be looking at in that. Then we're looking at using BEEF or browser exploitation framework to be able to, you know, simulate a client-side attack and also view its capabilities with respect to how it exploits. So we'll conclude with these methods of influence. One is authority. It just shows confidence, those guys who normally shout, and I don't they too send them. Authority is usually not very loud. That I know. Then scarcity and urgency. Usually you create scarcity, right? And then there's a need for urgency. So salesperson often use scarcity to manipulate clients. Like what happened some few days ago. We didn't have power and generator prices went up. Apart from that, there was this power bank that people use for laptops. The thing shot from, I think it was 45, 50K. It shot from there to 102,000 naira just within last week that we didn't have power. So normally scarcity and urgency can also create some form of, room for social engineers to attack. Then the social proof, typically is a psychological phenomenon where an individual is not able to determine the appropriate mode of behavior. So he's looking at people to tell that their behavior is actually the acceptable. So he may take advantage of social proof when an individual enters an unfamiliar situation. Like it happens in Lagos a lot of times. Sorry, Lagosians. My first experience in Lagos was not very palatable. The place I was going to Cisco office and entered into a taxi. And I told the guy to take me to Cisco office. Cisco office by Silverbed, because I didn't know the place. I think the way I presented myself, the taxi driver knew that I didn't know the place. But when the guy started carrying me, he told me then it was 500 naira. But the person who told me that the cost was 70 naira, that I should take bike, but that he would prefer me to take a taxi so that they would drop me